The moment that changed everything happened in about 10 seconds, and yeah, I still remember it frame by frame. I was standing in the grocery store, half asleep, scrolling through my phone when a motion alert popped up from my security cam, and I expected a raccoon or a deer, something normal, but instead I saw a woman I never invited, never trusted, and definitely never gave permission to, stretched out in my private sauna like she'd booked it on Airbnb. Towel wrapped around her, wine bottle in hand, spa music playing, completely relaxed. And right before the audio cut, she leaned into her phone and laughed. He'll never know. It's basically community property. Yeah, that happened. And right there, something inside me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, dangerous calm that told me this wasn't going to end with me politely asking for respect. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand why that sauna mattered so much to me. I'm a vet. Did my time overseas came home with a body that still worked and a mind that didn't always cooperate. PTSD doesn't announce itself. It just sneaks up on you, and some days you're fine. Other days your chest feels like it's collapsing over nothing. Therapy helped, routine helped, but what helped most was space. Quiet. Control. That's why I bought land just outside the HOA boundary. Not near it, not kind of touching it, outside it. I checked the maps, pulled the surveys, got everything documented, notarized, filed. I wanted zero gray area. I wanted a place where no one could knock on my door and tell me how to live. You know what I mean? The sauna wasn't a luxury thing. It was survival. I built it myself behind a line of cedar trees about 10 yards from the fence, tucked away so it felt private, safe mine. I got permits, inspections, zoning clearance, the whole boring legal checklist, because I already knew the kind of person who would come sniffing around. I even put a small sign on the door: private property. No entry, nothing aggressive, just clear. And that's when she entered the picture. We'll call her Karen, because honestly, if the shoe fits. She was the HOA president from the neighborhood behind my property, and she treated that role like she'd been crowned ruler of a small kingdom. Clipboard always in hand, that tight little smile that never reaches the eyes, the kind of voice that sounds sweet but carries a threat underneath. The first time she came after me, it was over my porch lights. Solar-powered, soft amber glow, barely brighter than candles. She left a violation notice in my mailbox about disrupting community aesthetics. I walked up to the fence, calmly told her my property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and she just smiled and said, "Everyone benefits from standards." Then she walked away like she'd done me a favor. After that, it became a pattern. She tried to shame me at an HOA meeting for not attending a block barbecue. She hired a landscaping crew to trim a tree on my side of the fence because it violated some imaginary silhouette guideline. It was a heritage oak older than most of the houses. I had to threaten legal action to stop her. And every time she acted like she owned me, like my quiet made me weak. So when I saw her in my sauna on that camera feed, it wasn't just shock, it was confirmation. She didn't sneak in. She didn't hesitate. She walked in like she belonged there, like she'd done it before. Inside, camera showed her connecting her Bluetooth speaker, replacing my meditation playlist with some awful new age elevator music, uncorking wine, laying back like Cleopatra on vacation. I watched her sit there for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. And the whole time, all I could think was, she doesn't just think this place is hers. She thinks I won't do anything about it. I waited until she left. Watched her stroll off my land like nothing happened. That night I didn't sleep. I replayed the footage over and over, her grin, her whisper, the way she treated my sanctuary like a joke. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about the sauna, it was about power. About someone deciding my boundaries didn't matter because I kept to myself, because I didn't yell, because I didn't play their little neighborhood politics. The next morning I called an old friend of mine who runs wildlife control. Good guy. The kind who can relocate skunks without harming them, and still crack jokes while doing it. A few years back, he'd helped me deal with actual skunks under my deck, and as we talked, I asked him if he still had scent deterrent equipment. There was a pause, then laughter. "What did someone do to you?" he asked. I told him everything. He laughed so hard he almost dropped the phone. Here's the thing. Those scent deterrents are legal, non-toxic, designed to keep coyotes and raccoons away. They don't hurt anyone but the smell. The smell is unforgettable. He dropped one off later that week. I tested it in my garage once and immediately regretted every life choice that led to that moment. I had to evacuate my own house for an hour. But it worked. Perfectly. So I installed it discreetly under the sauna bench, wired it to a remote trigger on my phone, adjusted the cameras, fine-tuned the motion sensors. I reinforced the door with a gentle auto-close hinge so it would shut behind anyone who entered. It wasn't about trapping someone. It was about teaching a lesson. And I knew she'd come back. People like her always do. Sure enough, the very next day I found another violation notice taped to my front door. This time she claimed my private property sign was unauthorized signage affecting community harmony. She even included a photo with a red circle around it like she was solving a crime. I stood there barefoot with coffee in my hand and just laughed because the audacity was almost impressive. She trespasses, then cites me for trying to stop her from trespassing. That's when I decided I wasn't handling this quietly anymore. I wanted witnesses. That evening I went to the HOA meeting. Beige clubhouse fluorescent lights chairs lined up like a sad church service. Karen sat at the front, smug as ever. When new business came up, I stood and said I had something the board should see. She tried to wave me off. I smiled, held up my tablet, and said, "This isn't drama. This is trespassing." I played the footage. There she was, clear as day, walking onto my property, unlocking my sauna, making herself at home. The room went silent. Someone gasped. When the video ended, I looked right at her and asked, "Any thoughts?" She sputtered about context, claimed she thought it was a shared amenity. I repeated the word amenity out loud and reminded her it was my legally excluded property. An older guy in the back leaned forward and said, "That's trespassing." And just like that, her authority cracked. The board said they'd look into it, but the damage was done. 2 days later, I was making eggs when my phone buzzed again. Motion alert. I opened the feed and there she was, creeping back in a towel face mask on slippers flapping. She slipped into the sauna and sighed like she'd entered paradise. Inside, Cam showed her setting down wine, pulling out her speaker, fanning herself with a laminated HOA rulebook. I waited a few seconds. Then I tapped the trigger. At first, she wrinkled her nose, then confusion, then horror. She bolted upright, gagging, waving her hands, scrambling for the door. Heat and humidity made the latch stick just long enough to push her into full panic. She pounded on the glass, slipped on her towel, and finally burst out of the sauna like she'd been launched from a cannon. Steam everywhere, mask-melting towel, barely holding on, screaming and sprinting across my yard like she'd just been chased by a demon. She didn't even grab her wine. I was half laughing, half cringing because it was absurd, and because it was exactly what she'd earned. 30 minutes later, the police showed up. She'd called them ranting about chemical attacks and assault. The officers asked if I had footage. I played it. They watched her trespass settle in and trigger the situation herself. One officer bit his lip, trying not to laugh. The other told her plainly, "This is private property. You're lucky it wasn't a real skunk." She got a warning for trespassing and stormed off, towel over her head like a disgraced reality TV star. That night, I rewatched the footage, not out of revenge, but because I hadn't laughed that hard in years. It felt like taking something that had been used to belittle me and flipping it into something I controlled. Then the neighborhood found out. A neighbor caught her final sprint on his phone. By noon, the video hit the local Facebook group. No caption. Just her running. It exploded. Memes. Nicknames. Someone auto-tuned her scream. She became a joke overnight. You'd think that would end it. It didn't. She sent a laughably bad cease and desist letter full of spelling errors demanding apologies and removal of the sauna. My lawyer laughed and told me not to worry. Meanwhile, neighbors started coming forward with their own stories. Fines over memorial wreaths, porch swings, birthday balloons. Years of petty cruelty poured out. We called an emergency HOA meeting. Karen showed up defiant, smug. We let her talk. Then I presented the evidence, played the footage, showed the fake legal letter, and then neighbors spoke one by one. The vote wasn't close. She was removed as HOA president effective immediately. The room actually cheered. She stormed out defeated. After that, she tried flyers, complaints, even a restraining order. All denied. Slowly, the noise faded. A month later, her house went up for sale. A few days after that, the moving truck arrived. She glanced at my house once, hollow-eyed. I gave a small wave. She didn't return it. She drove away. That night, I sat in my sauna, breathing in cedar, not skunk. Peace. I replaced the old sign with one I carved myself. Trespassers will be skunked. Half joke, half warning, full story. The neighborhood changed after that. People smiled more. Kids played louder. The HOA focused on real issues. And I finally got what I came here for. Not isolation, but respect. But here's the part I still think about. Did I go too far? I didn't hurt her. It was legal. She chose to trespass. Some people say it was petty. Others say it was justice. So I want to hear from you. If someone invaded your space, not just your yard, but your peace, what would you do? Was this deserved or did I cross a line? Drop your thoughts. Share your stories, especially if you've dealt with someone who thought rules only applied to everyone else. Because sometimes the line between justice and revenge isn't as clear as people like to pretend.